mother-in-law, who was looking at me with a cold gaze. I had no idea of the nightmares that awaited me. My name is Bella. I'm 32 years old. Both my parents passed away in a car accident when I was still in college, leaving me all alone in this world. The grief was unbearable, but John, my then boyfriend, supported me, and we got married shortly after graduating. We were living happily with our 8-year-old daughter, Hannah. My in-laws consisted of my mother-in-law and brother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away from a sudden heart attack a year ago, surprising everyone in the family. My in-laws were affluent and ran a business, so we were never in a financial bind. My father-in-law had intended for his kind and considerate younger brother, who had business acumen, to take over as CEO. However, he passed away suddenly before this could happen. Ultimately, the eldest son, my brother-in-law, took over. Father wanted me to take over, but I couldn't possibly do that over my older brother. I'll support him, my husband had said. He respected his brother deeply and had no objection to giving up the position of CEO. My brother-in-law was very kind to me and often spoke to me in a friendly manner. However, I didn't have much interaction with my mother-in-law, whom I found somewhat difficult. When I just got married, my mother-in-law was very kind to me and would cook with me, saying, "I don't have a daughter, so I love spending time with you like this." However, she suddenly turned cold after my father-in-law passed away. She turned cold to both me and my husband and even avoided making any eye contact with us. I was perplexed. Even towards Hannah, who used to dote on her as her first grandchild, she would glare and shut her down even when Hannah approached her, calling grandma. "She used to be such a sweet person before," said my upset husband. I felt very sorry for him. "Something's off about Mom. She's glaring at me as if I'm her enemy. Does she think we're after her assets? Or could she be ill or something?" My husband wondered. He had been thinking deeply about his mother's change in behavior but couldn't come up with any reason. In fact, we first noticed her change during my father-in-law's one-week memorial service when we were staying at her house. Exhausted from the memorial service, we slept soundly, but when we woke up in the morning, we noticed that the bag with our change of clothes we had left in the room was missing. "Could it be a burglar?" I asked. "No, it's strange that only our bag is missing. Let's look for it," my husband replied. While we were searching, we saw smoke rising from the backyard through the window. In disbelief, we went to check and found our belongings being burned. There was my mother-in-law. "Mom, you didn't do this, did you?" "Mother-in-law, please answer us." My mother-in-law said nothing. Her eyes were wide open, her lips pale white, and her hands were shaking. She seemed scared. "Mom, why did you do this? What is it about us that you don't like?" John asked, confused by her silence. He leaned closer to her and spoke gently. "You're not worried about us going after your assets, are you?" "I'm not after your assets. You can rest easy. We care about you, mother-in-law." Despite her earnest appeals, she coldly declared, "Get out of here, both of you, and don't come back." Baffled, we hurriedly left her house and have since become estranged, barely visiting for the past year. As much as it pained us, we felt like we couldn't reach mother-in-law, who clearly despised us. Then, one day, we received a message from my brother-in-law about the first anniversary memorial service for my father-in-law. All the relatives were gathering, so we decided to go, but my mother-in-law remained as cold as ever. Seeing this seemed to make John think more frequently. "What's the matter, John? Are you worried about mother-in-law?" I asked. "Huh? Oh, it's nothing. If there's anything I can do for you, just tell me," I said. "Don't worry about it, Bella. You don't need to worry about anything," he replied, gently stroking my cheek. His kind smile brought me great relief and soothed my feelings. About a month passed after that. "Well, I'm off," he said as he left for his business trip, cheerfully greeting me and our daughter Hannah, as usual. But he quickly returned, saying, "I forgot to give you this," and handed me a cute little charm. "This will surely protect you," he said with his gentle smile. I thought to myself how truly grateful I was to be married to him. However, a shocking event occurred the very next day. John had taken his own life. His car was found parked on a mountain road near my parents' house in Colorado. Inside the car, he was frothing at the mouth, taking his last breaths. Although he had told me he was on a business trip, his company said there were no trips scheduled that day. Moreover, I was told that just before his death, he had called my brother-in-law and whispered, "I can't go on living. It has become too painful. I'm sorry." I tried to stop him, but it turned out like this. My brother-in-law repeatedly apologized to me, According to the police, traces of a poisonous plant were found in his stomach. They said that this plant grows naturally in the mountains and can be easily obtained with a little knowledge. In the end, given my brother-in-law's testimony, it was concluded that John had likely consumed it to end his own life. I bitterly blamed myself for not noticing his pain and having no clue why this happened. In front of my husband's body, I was about to collapse, but my brother-in-law supported me. "Stay strong, Bella. This is hard for me too. I wish I had been more understanding of John's feelings." "Why? Why did this happen?" I cried, holding on to Hannah, who was also crying. But my mother-in-law was glaring at us with a pale face, showing no tears. While I was overwhelmed with grief, my brother-in-law and colleagues from the company proceeded with the funeral arrangements. "Please wake up," I whispered on the day of the funeral. My husband John lay peacefully in the casket with his usual gentle expression. It seemed as if he would wake up any moment if I called out to him. As I clung to my husband, tears streamed down my cheeks. Then I noticed it. A single photo was placed on John's chest. Who could have placed this photo here? Curious, I picked up the photo to find that the part of the family photo showing John's face had been slashed mercilessly with a cutter. On the back of the photo was the phrase, "Run away now, S." What does this mean? Who could this message be directed to? As shivers ran down my spine, I turned around and locked eyes with my mother-in-law, who was glaring at me with icy eyes. Could it be her? When I stared back, she hurriedly averted her gaze. At that moment, I felt my mother-in-law knew something. So I discreetly slipped the photo into the pocket of my mourning dress without anyone noticing. After the funeral, once things had calmed down a bit, I started to think again about the photo. I still didn't know who had put the photo in the casket. I thought this S in the message might be someone's initial. The only person I could think of with a name starting with S was Scarlett, my mother-in-law. I always found it hard to believe that John would take his own life and leave me and our daughter Hannah behind. I hoped to find any reason, however small. That's why I decided to bravely visit my mother-in-law. When I arrived at her house, she greeted me with the same cold expression. Unfortunately, my brother-in-law was at work and wasn't home, so it was just the two of us. "What brings you here all of a sudden?" she asked. "Well, I was hoping to find out more about why John passed away. I thought there might be some clue here at his childhood home," I replied, lying on the spot because I didn't have the courage to confront her directly. As I looked for a topic of conversation, I glanced at the large bookshelf that covered one wall of the living room. The bookshelf, a product of the book-loving family, was filled with novels, encyclopedias, and dictionaries. There were also a few books that John had read during his student days. I couldn't help but pick up a few out of nostalgia. Each book had a stamp at the end of every page to indicate who it belonged to. Next to John's initial J was a small cuddling cat. That was so like him, and a smile escaped my lips. However, I could feel the cold stare of my mother-in-law on my back as I continued to flip through the books. Suddenly, I noticed a book that still had a cover on it. Picking it up, I saw it was a book on poisonous plants. There were several post-it notes in it, and when I opened one, it was about the poisonous plant that my husband had used. At the last page of the book, there was also a stamp of ownership. "Mother-in-law, what is the meaning of this?" I asked. She burst into tears. "I am the one to blame. Forgive me." The truth, she confessed, was shocking. "Please tell the police," I said. "Yes, I understand," she replied, and so I reported it to the police. Just then, my brother-in-law returned home, unaware of the situation. Noticing the sorrowful look on my mother-in-law's face, he asked with a worried expression, "What happened? Even Bella's here. Did something happen?" "I just wanted to discuss my husband with my mother-in-law," I said. "I see. Losing him must have been hard for you. Are you feeling a little better now, Bella?" he asked. As I mumbled and looked down, unable to tell him the truth, he began to speak something unexpected. "I know it's not the right time to say this, but I've always had feelings for you, Bella. I also think Hannah is adorable. Would you consider remarrying me?" he asked. I was surprised by his sudden revelation. I never expected my brother-in-law to have such feelings for me. "Thank you, brother-in-law, but I can't think about such a thing right now." "Yeah, I understand," he replied, scratching his head shyly. I handed him the photograph. When he saw the photo of my husband's face slashed and the words "Run away now" on the back, he turned pale and gasped. "This was found inside my husband's coffin. Who could do such a thing? It seems like someone at the funeral might know who harmed my husband," I said. "Hold on a minute. John took his own life, so there's no culprit, he said, bewildered, his eyes darting restlessly. But in my dreams, my husband screams, I've been duped by that guy. I hate him, I said. His eyes widened at my words, staring at me with a shocked expression. Also, I found this in the bookshelf in the living room, I continued, showing him the book about poisonous plants. I pointed to the owner's bookplate, which read my brother-in-law's name, Ken. What are you trying to say? Are you implying that I murdered my brother? He asked. I didn't answer his question and instead continued my story. My mother-in-law, who had been silent and looking down beside me, was holding her breath and watching how things were unfolding. And take a look at this, I said, pulling out the little charm my husband had given me. Inside, there was a letter. It read, my brother killed our father with a poisonous plant. I had been clutching the charm throughout John's funeral and realized there was something inside it only later. This isn't valid evidence, my brother-in-law scoffed. Then what about this? I pulled out my phone and played a video. It showed a conversation between my husband and my brother-in-law. In the video, my brother-in-law admitted that he took their father's life on purpose. He even said, I'm not coming after your family. I will turn myself in to the police. My husband had secretly set up a camera in their parents' house, as mentioned in the letter he left for me. You confessed your crime to my husband, then reassured him you'd turn yourself in, only to take his life using the same poisonous plant, didn't you? John trusted you until the very end. Why did you do such a thing? I pressed him. My brother-in-law's expression shifted from gentle to terrifying as he glared at me, clicking his tongue in frustration. At that moment, my mother-in-law burst into tears, sobbing out loud. Why? Why such a cruel thing? She had just confessed everything to me. The brothers had been very close during their childhood, but over time, my brother-in-law grew envious of his talented younger brother and started messing with him through petty pranks like hiding and damaging his possessions. Aware of this, my in-laws disciplined my brother-in-law strictly, but John never blamed him and continued to admire him. This disheartened my mother-in-law. After my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law found a book about poisonous plants while cleaning the bookshelf. Although my husband was diagnosed with a heart attack, he had never been warned of any heart issues in his previous medical checkups. She suspected something wasn't right and noticed a bookmark in the book detailing symptoms similar to those my husband had before he passed away. She also found a photo of John's face slashed with a box cutter hidden within the pages of the book. Without concrete evidence and knowing my brother-in-law wouldn't admit to anything, my mother-in-law chose not to confront him. During my father-in-law's memorial service, she was deeply shaken to find my brother-in-law burning our bags to keep us away from the family home. She explained this in a pained voice, her face lined with worry. Even though we stopped visiting their home, my mother-in-law noticed my brother-in-law becoming more and more grim, murmuring to himself, I have to do something about John. She tried to warn me about it at my husband's first memorial by passing the message to run away now, using the photo. She also whispered to John that Ken might have killed their father, but it backfired. Had my husband not known, he probably wouldn't have gone to meet my brother-in-law, and things wouldn't have turned out this way. My mother-in-law regretted and blamed herself for everything. I couldn't respond to her words. It's all because our father decided not to let me take over the company. But John always said he couldn't become president by pushing you aside. Like I care. Both your father and John loved you. You didn't have to go this far. What's the point now? The parents who only doted on my younger brother are to blame, and so is the good boy, he sneered. As I stood there, heartbroken and dismayed, the weight of the family's hidden resentments and tragedies pressed down on me. It's all your fault, John, my brother-in-law spat, his defiant expression sending chills down my spine. How dare you take away my dear husband? I will never forgive you. Shut up. If you hadn't meddled, I might have even made you my wife, he retorted. Suddenly, my enraged brother-in-law pulled out a knife he had been hiding and started coming at me. I cried out for help and tried to escape, but he was quick and soon stood right in front of me. Cornered and facing a raised knife, I instinctively closed my eyes. At that moment, a loud thud hit. Someone had jumped in to protect me. It was my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law, are you okay? I asked, seeing blood seeping from her arm. We're missing? She held her wounded arm. Ken, please stop doing these awful things. Please turn yourself in. Shut up. Both of you just have to disappear, he shouted. You became the CEO you always wanted to be. Why would you go this far? I asked, desperate for answers. I need money, he snarled. Having taken over the company without any managerial talent, my brother-in-law had accrued substantial debt within a year. He was now in desperate need of money and had even taken out a high-value life insurance policy on my husband. It's funny. John believed me easily when I said I was going to turn myself in. He laughed menacingly. I felt intense revulsion at his demeanor. But John still wanted to save you. Why didn't you understand that? It's all my parents' fault for favoring John over me, he screamed. At that moment, the police who had been called earlier arrived. My brother-in-law struggled until the end, pleading, I did nothing wrong. Forgive me. Overlook this. You deserve to go to hell, I snapped. My brother-in-law gasped, finally calming down as he was taken away by the police. Fortunately, my mother-in-law's injury was not serious. In the end, my brother-in-law showed no signs of remorse and will likely remain behind bars. I am now living with my mother-in-law at her place. She has returned to her old self and is loving towards my daughter Hannah. We are happily living together, and the letter in the charm had more to it. Bella, you are my treasure. I love you always. Embracing my husband's feelings, I have decided to keep living, cherishing the love we shared.